Last time, we discovered that the zombies we've been running into are the undead slaves of Elijah Pickford, the former pirate who, over a century ago, built this house. We didn't find out where Jeremy had been staying these past few days, but at least we now know where he wasn't, and that narrows down the possibilities. He must have moved into one of the spare bedrooms on the second floor. Pickford Slaves is the in-story explanation for the zombies, but what was their real source, before the story was written? That's easy. Some of Reynal's favorite films include The Amityville Horror, which, as you know, inspired the game as a whole, The Evil Dead, I'll direct you to the front door for that one, Suspiria, Phantasm. But as for the zombies, as soon as Reynal had an engine capable of it, he knew he wanted to make a zombie game. And those zombies came directly from the 1978 George Romero film Dawn of the Dead. This is the nicer of the two spare bedrooms. I don't think this is the one we're looking for, but while we're here, let's check it out. That growling behind the curtain is worrisome. That looks like one of Uncle Jeremy's sketchbooks on the mantel, but that window... Things have a tendency to fly through them at the most inappropriate of moments. Yes, it's Jeremy's. His initials are on the cover. As I suspected. You know, the creators called them bird monsters, and the clue book calls them winged beasts. But from where I'm standing, they don't actually appear to have wings. Now, the sketchbook. It looks like Uncle Jeremy was using it as a makeshift diary. So, Jeremy had been having these strange nightmares for the past several months. Nightmares that he seemed to think were beginning to encroach on reality. He began studying the books in the library, the same books his late father had pored over, trying to locate Pickford's treasure, hoping that they held the key to his visions. Far from improving matters, things became much worse. Jeremy began to question his sanity, as did his servants, as did his art patron. His pictures were clearly the work of a lunatic, he said. His doctor said that he needed rest, and advised him to keep to his bed, but in his sleep he was menaced by someone he describes as the Dark Man. Jeremy moved to a different bedroom, where for a time he slept better, but again the Dark Man found him, appearing by the fireplace, perhaps in a dream, perhaps not in a dream. One day, the butler discovered a hole in the cellar wall that seemed to lead to a cavern under the house. Surely the very cavern Uncle Jeremy's father searched so long for, believing it to be the hiding place of Pickford's treasure. He may have found it, too. Jeremy had been told his father died of a heart attack, but that was a polite fiction. His father's body was found in the cellar. His fingernails were torn out from clawing at the floor. His tongue he had bitten off. That was the cause of his death. He choked on his own blood. In a dream, the Dark Man led Jeremy on a tour of the cavern. Before, Jeremy thought the Dark Man meant to kill him, but it was then that he realized the Dark Man had no interest in his death. That the Dark Man wanted his body. Jeremy seemed to think that he was the cause of all this. That his romantic mind allowed the Dark Man into his subconscious, and that his studies in Pickford's library had unleashed his servants into the waking world. In the last entry, Jeremy admits that he's too weak to defeat the evil set loose in the house, and that he had decided to... He trails off. To hang himself, of course, that's what he did, but... He thought this Dark Man didn't want him dead. Did he kill himself to thwart whatever plans the Dark Man did have for him? Pay attention to the dates on these entries. You might notice that they don't exactly agree with the established timeline. Today is August 29th, 1924, 4 days after Jeremy hanged himself, which was on the 25th according to the Mystery Examiner. Now, I'm sure this was just a random date, but as always, the strategy guide tries to find meaning in it. They say it marks the summer solstice. That would be a feat, since, while the exact day of the summer solstice does vary, it's always sometime in June. August 29th is closer to the equinox than it is the solstice, but let's just forget what the strategy guide has to say. Later games in the Alone in the Dark series, while they don't give an exact date, do at least agree that the year is 1924. Part 2 takes place after this game, in December of 24. Part 3 occurs 7 months later, July 1925. With that in mind, perhaps in addition to painting, Jeremy also dabbled in time travel. The first entry in this diary is from next month. The final one is from March of next year, not only after this game is ended, but completely skipping over Alone in the Dark 2. Actually, that's probably for the best. Good work, Jeremy. Now, a die-hard fan, unable to accept that the game could simply be contradicting itself, might reason that this is a product of Jeremy's descent into madness. He was unaware even what year it was. If you want to accept that, I suppose that's the finest excuse you'll find. This is the bedroom with the fireplace, the one Uncle Jeremy wrote about, where the Dark Man appeared to him. He obviously wouldn't have stayed here after that, he must have moved to the other spare bedroom, but let's go have a look at the gallery. The frame rate drops significantly in this hallway, with Emily, the two objects, and an active enemy all visible at the same time. The engine allows for the frame rate to vary between 10 and 70 frames per second, depending on the processor speed and the number of polygons on screen. The speed could be improved by shrinking the draw window, which many games did, often masking the fact by filling in the leftover screen real estate with health, ammunition, or inventory displays. But the creators of Alone in the Dark wanted an immersive, cinema-like environment, and that requires full screen to be effective. These three paintings are said to be concept art for Prisoner of Ice, which would have been the third game in the Call of Cthulhu series, coming after Shadow of the Comet. Even assuming that they were added late in 1992, development on Prisoner of Ice probably still wouldn't have even begun for another year or more. The game would have been in very preliminary planning. It must have been if this is indeed concept art for it. These paintings... I'm not a Prisoner of Ice expert, but they don't look much like it to me. Now this is fascinating. It must show something from Uncle Jeremy's cavern dream. An underground body of water, with an island at its center. Covering almost the whole of the island is an enormous tree. It must be centuries old. But at the base of the tree they almost look like flames. Yes, I think they are flames. The tree has been set on fire. I think we know why Uncle Jeremy killed himself, but I'd still like to find what room he'd been sleeping in. It wasn't his own room. It wasn't the good guest room. There's only one place left. Glad we got more oil. Yes, this is where he slept. The bed is disheveled and things are lying about. It's just as you'd expect a lived-in room abruptly abandoned to appear. That's one mystery solved. That statuette, it looks exactly like the illustration of Chaviteco we saw in that book about Cortez, the Sons of the Sun and Shadow. And is it ever heavy? So Boleskine did keep a diary during his voyage. You know, there's an estate in Scotland called Boleskine House. That could be a coincidence, of course, but Lord Boleskine's first name is Alistair, and from 1899 to 1913, Boleskine House was owned by another Alistair, Alistair Crowley, the occultist. Ah, you might object, the spelling is different. True. But you'll notice that this book was printed by Alistair Publications, spelled the way Crowley spelled it. One traveled to a small New England town where one noticed the townsfolk showed signs of degeneracy. Boleskine had an odd way of speaking, always referring to himself in the indefinite genderless third person. The exact same sort of sentence can be constructed in French, so you might think that this is a direct translation. But it isn't. It's a character quirk peculiar to the English version. In a clearing in the woods, Boleskine witnessed a prodigious natural phenomena. The night sky was so clear, and the stars seemed so close, Boleskine could perceive all the constellations with perfect clarity. He wondered if others knew about this strange place. They must, he reasoned, since a stone cross had been erected there. Once more, all this comes directly from Shadow of the Comet. It's the entire setup, actually. Whatever happened the next night drove Boleskine to insanity. There's a slight issue with the date of publication. 1824 is more than a decade before Halley's Comet would appear, and it's 9 years before the first book announcing Boleskine's intention to even embark on the voyage was published. In the French version, it gives the more feasible publication date of 1884. I have a suspicion the translators were working from a handwritten text and confused the second 8s for a 2. In later interviews, Reynolds commented on how compartmentalized game-making has become, as development teams and budgets have grown larger and larger. But even in the Alone in the Dark days, the divide between the programming side of things and the graphics side was widening. The 3D rendering routines of the Alone in the Dark engine are written in assembly. Other parts seem to have been done in Turbo C. To allow the graphics side to begin laying out the rooms and events, while the programming side was still at work on the engine, a scripting language was developed, one that didn't require a programmer's knowledge of how the engine functioned to be able to use it. This wasn't a new idea, of course. You might have heard of LucasArts' Scum scripting language, which dates back to Maniac Mansion in 1987. Do you remember when we first came down these stairs, that suit of armor laughed at us? We read something about armor and laughter. The conquistadors in the Son of the Sun and Shadows book were all wearing full armor. It made point to note that. The Aztec priest laughed when they found themselves immobilized in the face of Chaviteco. The spell was broken only after Cortez threw his dagger at the cackling priest. I think we should introduce the knight to this statuette. That worked out well. And we got a sword for our efforts. This one certainly looks sturdier than the old saber we got upstairs. We used the mirrors, we used the arrows, we used the water jug, and now we've used the statuette. I'm suddenly struck that we haven't found a use for our gramophone or records. The ballroom seems to be a likely place. Ah, door's locked. No matter, we can get in through what should be the parlor, but Uncle Jeremy, not being one to entertain, used it mainly for storage. It seems a pirate has taken up residence. A minor inconvenience. By this point, Emily is a seasoned professional at dealing with the supernatural. I have to admit, Emily probably wasn't expecting that. This is honestly the most difficult fight in the game, if only because it suddenly changes all the rules the previous fights worked under. Maybe, like the painting upstairs, we have to face this enemy with his own weapon. That, at least, is precedented. You can only hit the pirates with either the sword or the saber, but he'll block all of your strikes if you try to go directly against him. Emily can block as well. This is her parry animation. The way to defeat the pirates without taking damage requires you to realize that since the animations in the game are not predefined, but rather based on keyframes, you can change one style of attack into another as you're attacking. For example, if you slash right to left, the first keyframe might be you extending the sword out to your right side, and the second might be the sword thrust forward. The engine dynamically creates the frames in between. In a simple attack like that, the pirate sees which way you're attacking from and moves to block it. What you must do is fake in one direction, and then quickly change attacks and come from the opposite side. Without knowing the trick, the only way to kill him is by attrition. When the pirate is striking you, he can't simultaneously block, so it's possible to get in a return hit. As long as you have more than his 15 HP, you'll win the fight. We got a key out of the pirate, but before concerning ourselves with that, during the fight I noticed a book tucked away behind that canvas. Demonia Particularis by Heinrich Kassel, Ring Publications. I don't know if that's significant. I can find many Heinrich Kassels, it isn't an uncommon name, but none of them seem especially relevant. I also don't know if the two Greek letter mu's used as dividers mean anything. Mu comes from the Egyptian hieroglyphic for water. Castle comes from the Latin word for fortification. A place ringed by water that a particular demon might use as a holdout? If that's actually the intent, and not just me being silly, it's the most egregious example of a Nostradamus adventure game clue ever. You know, the sort where it only kinda makes sense in hindsight, after the puzzle's already been completed. Anyway, the book itself said little. More flavor text about invoking the old ones and the dangers it presents to the officiant. I bet I know what the pirate's key is for. Oh, more ghosts. Just as before, they aren't aggressive, but I don't think they take kindly to being disturbed. There's a strange-looking key on the mantle, but with the ghosts in the way, I don't think we can reach it. It looks like there's a loose record on top of the music cabinet in the corner. The ghosts look like they're ready to dance. Maybe they're waiting for the music to start. But what do you suppose they'd like to hear? There's the record we just picked up. The record we got from the smoking room. And the record that was locked in Uncle Jeremy's study. I think that's the one we should try. And there they go. The path is clear to the key. Now, to exit the way we came in, we just need to avoid the dancers. Huh. Must have been offended that their audience left. Now, to tell you a little secret. The door to the conservatory is across this room, and as I mentioned before, it isn't locked. When you grab the arrows from behind the statue, it triggers spiders to drop from the ceiling. The spiders are intended to block this path to the ballroom, forcing you to confront the pirates, since, spoiler, this door never unlocks. However, the spider's AI is highly predictable, and there are certain things you can do to coerce them into a position where it's still possible to reach the ballroom through the conservatory. Meaning, finding Jeremy's new bedroom, getting the sword, and defeating the pirates were all entirely optional. Speedrunners, take note. Now, you may remember there was a book in the library that contained a floor plan of this level of the house. At that time, Emily noted that the door to the wine cellar had been curiously omitted. Uncle Jeremy's diary mentioned that an opening had been found somewhere in the cellar that led to a cavern. Surely it's the cavern network described in If Rocks Could Talk, the one that prompted Pickford to build their settle here in the first place. If we are going to finish the job Uncle Jeremy was too weak to see through, we need to gain access to that cavern. The door is locked. But it's only a wine cellar. I'm sure the key is in the kitchen. Okay, where is it? Box of matches, we already have one, and besides, we've got the lighter now. We know what's in there, it's just a knife. What about the pantry? And there it goes! I knew this wouldn't be difficult. Anything else in here? A box of biscuits. They only add 5 HP, but that does mean Emily's HP is high enough now that ghosts can't one-hit kill her. The biscuits are the final healing item in the game. Yes, 2 flasks and some cookies are all there is. We've been playing very carefully so far, and with Emily's HP as high as it is, we aren't in any danger. But if you haven't been so careful, you might easily find yourself rather the worse for wear going into the endgame. The rats in the cellar are horrible things. They'll circle around the wine racks until they spot you. It is possible to stealth your way past them, at least the first two, but they make exploration such a chore. I want to spend some time searching this end of the cellar, so I'm going to purposefully alert this rat and get him stuck in the room geometry. The cavern entrance is probably along this far wall, but there could be something else down here of interest. Like a book, for instance. No time to read it now, though. The rat just broke loose. Ow! Emily just stubbed her toe on a block of wood, jammed under these wine casks. There it is. Not so much a crack as a very deliberately cut doorway, but let's go see what scared Uncle Jeremy's father literally to death. I think that may be one of the Vermis Mysteriis. We need to get out of here quick. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to use that entrance to the cavern. There must be another somewhere in the house, but where would Pickford have hidden it?